Welcome back to RavenzCraft Magic. This is the Planetary Magic series, episode 4, Saturn. Saturn is a very powerful planet and has many symbols. A lot of the symbols are used today. Take a drive around and look at all the cars. I've never noticed how many planetary symbols are on cars. Especially Saturn. Saturn has a lot of symbols. Do you think there's any connection with that? You know, everybody needs a car. Why do they have all these symbols on the cars? Anyway, I'm not the only crazy one. Here's a really cool channel called ODD TV. You should check them out. Take a little look at this clip.
Nissan, simple Saturn logo. Saturn cars. Here's an interesting one. We take Toyota, which semi looks like Saturn, but for those with eyes to see, we can also make out an owl. If you've done your research, it's simple to find that owls are one of the animals governed by Saturn. Here we go. I made a video about cigarettes and the occult where I pointed out these traffic cigarettes as XX, but at the time, the in-your-face Saturn eluded me. All you have to do is turn the box. We have DirecTV. This is the kind of simple Saturn symbol that I don't really point out. If you look up Saturn corporate logos, you'll find a video where somebody shows every logo that they could possibly find that has swooshes and half rings like Whirlpool, Burger King, Pepsi. It's trying to explain that. Look at that, dude, that's Saturn. And maybe it is, and yeah, it probably is, to be honest. But the thing is pointing that stuff out is kind of like, for beginners, they're gonna be like, I don't think so, dude. You're fucking tripping. So anyway. Sometimes it's just put out there, like Sega Saturn. Looks a lot like the Orphic egg, also known as the cosmic egg, world egg, and mundane egg. It's in many ancient creation myths. Here's an ad for Sega Saturn. Head for Saturn. This one is my favorite. It's my personal belief that the elite do this to toy with people. They will zone in on names to use for specific causes. This is how I see this ad. Up on the top left-hand corner it says Ice Cube on Saturn. All I see is Cube on Saturn. In his hand is the console looking like a cube. I believe in coincidences, I've just never seen one. So now we have the GameCube. You can immediately connect this with the star of Saturn. You can also immediately connect this to the G that's in the middle of the Masonic square and compass. And here's what Wiki says about the G. Varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but widely accepted as God or the great architect.
The reason I refer to it as the master of discipline is because Saturn brings order from chaos. Like its rings, it brought all the rock junk and the rocks surrounding it into a sort of balance to create its rings. It brought balance to that chaotic mess outside of it and gave it a direction in which to flow. Saturn is also referred to as the father planet. It teaches you about the rewards and the consequences of your actions. Saturn is like the father teaching the child that it has to crawl before it can walk, and you must walk before you run. It teaches you the correct ways of learning things to succeed. Saturn teaches you things, either from the bad or the good. He teaches you for the better of all. In my research with Saturn, I found something very interesting. The ancients used to worship Saturn as the sun. I found a clip that kind of explains a little bit more about it, a little better than I can. The only theory that I found that makes sense is the planets or the heavens may have been in a different place or have been closer to the Earth at those times. But I'm not too sure about that, and I am still actually intrigued in studying it more myself. But here's a little clip that I'm going to show you that kind of shows you what I'm talking about.
These days, Saturn can be seen with the naked eye, although it may be difficult for an average person to discern, so it's unclear as to when it was discovered. Early man worshipped heavenly bodies as gods. Myths proclaim we once lived in the presence of gods. These gods were visible powers, often unpredictable and frequently violent. The priestly astronomers of ancient Mesopotamia and elsewhere make clear that these remarkable powers were planets. Pictographs show what is commonly considered to be a sun as a huge disk with a smaller one in the center, often with rays flowing out of it, with a third darker circle superimposed in the center of that. Our sun looks nothing like that. In many different cultures, we see a symbol of a crescent with a star in its center. How could this be when there is no star or planet closer to Earth than our moon to form such a configuration? And most importantly, why do so many remote and widespread ancient cultures who most likely could have never been in contact with one another, such as the Sumerians, Egyptians, Chinese, Native American Indians, Mayans, Babylonians, Australian Aboriginals, and many others, all tell the same story and draw similar pictures? If these ancient writings were based on valid observations rather than fantasy, then it is suggested that planets were closer to Earth in the past and they moved in a collinear way, meaning that they were lined up as they traveled through space. For observers on Earth, the result was a unified configuration in the heavens, visually dominated by a large glowing planet, theorized to have been Saturn, then seen without its present ring system. The other two bodies in this configuration are believed to be Venus and Mars, with Venus in the middle shining brightly. In many ancient sources, Saturn is called Sun. The usual name for Saturn in Chaldean astronomy was Alap Shamash, meaning star of the sun. Diodorus of Sicily reported that the Chaldeans called Kronos, aka Saturn, by the name Helios, or the sun, and he explained that this was because Saturn was the most conspicuous of the planets. Popular Greek traditions identified Kronos as the alter ego of Helios. Hyginus also wrote that Saturn was called Sol. In the Babylonian astrological texts, the word Shamash, sun, was used to designate Saturn and represented by an 8-pointed star in the middle of a disk, or an 8-spoked wheel. If Saturn was always as inconspicuous as it is present, what could have caused the races of antiquity to give Saturn the name Sun, or the Shining One? Ninib was the Babylonian name for Saturn, or at least one of them. Other names include Ninurta, which according to numerous scholars was the inspiration for the biblical character Nimrod. Ninib is said to shine like the sun. Astrologers must have found it increasingly contrary to reason to associate the star that gives us light and life with one of the palest and slowest of the planets. That's where the word Saturnine comes from. It means dark, slow, and gloomy. The Romans named the planet after Saturnus, the god of the harvest responsible for the Golden Age, which is the same as the Greek god Kronos, with a C, and Chronos, with a K, often confused with Kronos with an H, the personification of time. It seems through the passage of millennia, Kronos has been infused with Kronos, who has been infused with death, aka the Grim Reaper, due to the fact that time leads to death. This is why separate searches for all of these characters will reveal them carrying a scythe. The ancient Greeks had two words for time, chronos and kairos. While chronos refers to chronological sequential time, kairos signifies specific opportune moments. Another noted deity that represents time is Ion, though Ion stands for time unbounded, while chronos symbolizes time divided into past, present, and future. God and time have always gone hand in hand. It reminds me of the watchmaker analogy, also known as the argument from design, which states, just as watches are set in motion by watchmakers, after which they operate according to their pre-established mechanisms, so also was the world begun by the God as creator, after which it and all its parts have operated according to their pre-established natural laws. With these laws perfectly in place, events have unfolded according to the prescribed plan. Sir Isaac Newton argued that the regular motion of the planets made it reasonable to believe in the continued existence of God. Newton also upheld the idea that, like a watchmaker, God was forced to intervene in the universe and tinker with the mechanism from time to time to ensure that it continued operating in good working order. Let's dig a little deeper into the many names of Saturn. Before the Romans and the Greeks, the Phoenicians worshipped the god Elis, or El, who was said to have sacrificed his only begotten son. Upon his death, he was deified as Saturn. Other Phoenician Canaanites worshipped Baal, which is also known as Moloch. Ancient Egypt's version of Cronus was assumed to be the god Jeb, but is also identified with Set or Seth. To the Hindus, he was called Shani, or Shani. To the Armenians, Zervan, or Zervan. It can get a little confusing and even controversial, especially to certain religious groups that don't realize they are pagans. But you just need to understand that seemingly all cultures and religions share astrotheological stories that result in the same characters under different names, and since their creation have diverged in slightly varied directions. If you look far enough into this, you'll find that Saturn can represent multiple gods within one system of deities, including Christianity. It is said that Saturn is the god of 1,000 names, and is no particular deity, but rather a universal spirit for the entire world that encompasses every aspect of our reality.
So you can kind of see what I mean about the confusion, and you can see why it's called the god with 1,000 names. Alright, well, there's one more little clip I want to show you guys. It talks about the holiday, the Greek holiday Saturnia. It's said to have inspired Christmas, so that kind of got me interested. And here is another small clip from the Son of Saturn. Awesome YouTube channel.
The ancient sun god Saturn had connections with the underworld, as is evident from the position of his Saturnalia festival in December, a month which is strictly reserved for sun gods of solar functions. It takes planet Saturn 28 to 30 years to complete its orbit of the zodiac, which places the planet Saturn in the sign of Capricorn for roughly 3 years, every 29 years, making it impossible to have an annual celebration of Saturnalia. In fact, the only way the Saturnalia celebration can be accounted for is if Saturn were originally revered as the sun, the same sun that we know and adore today. Saturn was the god of agriculture, sowing and harvest. These are 3 aspects that point directly to the sun and have no correlation with a planet. If you think it not so, I must ask, what does a dimly lit point of light in the night sky, on a 30-year orbit have to do with these things of solar alliance? Nothing. The fact is, if you do your homework, you will come to learn that most all the names for the planets were once names of sun gods. Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune were all sun gods, either for the different times of the day or assigned to the months and seasons of the solar year. Even the recently discovered Pluto was a sun god. A majority of scholars agree that Saturn must at some time have been a chthonic deity, somehow connected with agriculture, and more specifically with the corn harvest. According to some of them, his chthonic nature involved more gloomy aspects as well, connections with death and the underworld. Chthonic literally means subterranean, concerning, belonging to, or inhabiting the underworld. Saturn, whose exaltation is found in Libra, fall, rebelled and seized the kingdom, and Saturn himself was afterwards cast down into Capricorn, winter, by his own son Jupiter, summer. Saturn means hidden, because times and seasons are hidden. The Phoenician name of Hercules corresponds sufficiently with the Latin name of Saturnus. Both Hercules and Saturn were types of the winter sun. When this luminary hides himself, as it were, for the greater number of hours out of the 24, it is not surprising that he should be called Saturn, for this word evidently comes from the Hebrew satyr, latuit, to hide, conceal, to be hidden, lie hid. This is why Saturn and Kronos were always depicted as cowled or hooded. It is because they were originally conceived as the sun, the hidden or black sun below the earth. There were 2 special names of Saturn, the earth god and god of Sheol, or Hades. Hell, the sun, becomes Hell, Pluto. Or Zel, the sun, Sel, Sol, becomes Sheol, Hades. According to the pagan theology, the name of the supreme god of Hell, or monarch of Hades, was Pluto. The dominion of these regions fell to his lot when the world was divided between the 3 sons of Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, and Pluto. Pluto is described by the poets as riding in a chariot of ebony, drawn by 4 black horses. Horses are consecrated to the sun. On this old Roman coin, Saturn is also depicted with 4 horses. He can be nothing but the sun.
Also, I'm sure some of you have heard the story of Saturn the god, how he eats his children because he's scared of being overthrown and he wants to rule. In the Greek myths, it said that the wife of Saturn tricks him by feeding him a rock instead of the baby because she's sick of losing her children, and the baby that is saved actually is Zeus. I also think it kind of tries to explain a metaphor in a way about how time consumes all. Eventually time wins, time brings death to everything. And Saturn was also known as the god of time, or Kronos. Saturday is the day that you can work with Saturn. Obviously, the name Saturn is in the day Saturday. It is actually one of the only days that kept its old name in English today is Saturday. Saturn is associated with the Capricorn zodiac symbol. It's the horned animal with like a mermaid fish looking tail, said to be great observers and listeners. You can work with Saturn, to bring understanding to a chaotic matter or order to a violent or crazy situation in your life. Saturn is also associated with the number 8. The number 8 represents the material world, laws, rules, self-discipline, and in divination, the number 8 represents power, money, worldly involvement, and represents a hardworking person. So Saturn influences your self-discipline, life building, can also be used in protection, binding spells. It can also be used for destroying, so you have to be careful when you work with Saturn, Just plan things out, make sure everything's done the right way, take your time, don't make him mad. Saturn is the father. He teaches you how to correctly do things. It may take you longer to do those things that way, but in the end, it is better. So listen to your father. He is usually right. All the rules and the laws and everything will be okay. I'm sure you're thinking, wow, Saturn's pretty dangerous. I'm not going to mess with that. No, it's just as simple as following the rules and doing it right. Because within everything we do, if you just take your time, do it right, you create better results. And isn't that what we're all trying to do here? Create better results? Yes, exactly. So Saturn is a very good power or planet to work with. You just have to do your research and do it well. Have a good day, everyone. Stay on the positive path.